Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. I sat on the porch for the last time. I just finished loading all my belongings into the car. There were 2 cardboard boxes and 2 suitcases. I've gotten rid of most of the other things in the last 6 years. I didn't want to take anything beyond what was necessary. In my purse was a copy of the final divorce settlement and a check for half of our entire estate. I saw my now ex-husband, John Simmons, sitting quietly in the living room watching TV. He didn't say goodbye and didn't seem like he was going to do it. It was even for the best, because I don't think I wanted him to do it. I got my maiden name back by getting a divorce. Now I was Gene Parsons again. I've been waiting for this day for 6 years. It was the day my youngest daughter, Sarah, left for college. That was my commitment. We had 2 children, and Terry, the eldest, left for college 2 years ago. Sometimes it feels like I messed up just yesterday, and sometimes it feels like it's been forever since I messed up. John and I met 20 years ago. I worked as a waitress at a diner, and John was our regular customer. He was an operator of heavy equipment, bulldozers, and the like. He was big and strong, looked good, was very polite, and seemed to like me. I was still worried about the failed high school romance. Ray Cotton and I had a very stormy affair that lasted all the last years of school. When Ray left for MIT, I was devastated. He returned the first summer, and we resumed our personal life, but that was the last time I saw him. I heard that after graduating from university, he went to Seattle, but I had no confirmation of this. I was heartbroken. He was the love of my life. The only guy I've ever loved or will love left me without explanation. When John asked me out, it was the first time I was with another man. John was a good man, and it was a pleasure to meet him. He was never too open with me and did not try to force me to do anything. On several of our dates, it was obvious that he wanted to make love, and in the end we did. Shortly after that, John asked me to marry him. I wasn't really in love with John the way I was with Ray, but I saw that he would be a good breadwinner and husband. I married John for the wrong reasons, and it wasn't fair to him. Shortly after that, Terry and Sarah joined our family, and everything was calm, if not exciting, until Ray Cotton returned to my life 6 years ago. I was at the supermarket, just buying some small things, when I heard a familiar voice. Gene Parsons, is that you? I turned around and my heart skipped a beat. I felt like I hadn't felt in almost 15 years. It was Ray Cotton, and he looked better than ever. He was a little older, a little heavier, but as handsome as I remembered him. I was still mad at him for leaving me, but all those feelings disappeared as soon as I saw him. Hello. That's all I could say. I stood and looked at him, not knowing what to do, but knowing what I wanted to do. I had a strange feeling in my stomach. My head cleared up a bit. He finally spoke. You look wonderful, the way I remember you. I wanted to say something witty, but all I could say was, thank you. You look good yourself. Ray waved towards the food court, and we both headed there. What can I get you to drink? A Diet Coke will be enough. I sat and waited for him, trying to think of something to say. There was so much I wanted to know, but I didn't want to pry into his personal life. I felt young and nervous. Ray came back with the drinks, and we talked for almost an hour. We got up and walked out of the mall together to his car, a big yellow Hummer. I said it was terrible, and we both laughed. What we were doing was not discussed. I just got into the Hummer like it was a normal thing. We drove to his motel, and I walked him to his room. We never said what we were going to do. We just moved around like it was something we did every day. As soon as we were in the room, we immediately found ourselves in each other's arms. It was like high school. It's like the last 15 years have never happened. I had no thoughts about my husband, my children, or my life. At that moment, I didn't care. We both laughed heartily. It was all a lot of fun, and we ended up doing what young lovers usually do. Ray and I took a shower together, and he drove me back to the mall. We didn't say goodbye. I just quietly got out of the Hummer at the back of the building and left. I finished my shopping as if I was walking through the air. I couldn't sleep that night. I stayed up all night thinking about how wonderful my day was. At home, I created the illusion that everything was fine. I tried not to feel too happy or frivolous. I tried not to look guilty. I carefully made sure that nothing changed. I made sure that nothing had changed in my love life with John. I wasn't overly excited or demanding. The family must remain stable. However, this was the only thing that remained unchanged. For the next 3 weeks, I spent every spare minute with Ray. We only met in the afternoon when the kids were at school and John was at work. I didn't see him on weekends. I drove up to the mall, entered from the front, and exited from the back, where Ray was waiting. The first week, we always lived in a motel, and after he rented an apartment, we went there. I was so passionate about what I was doing that I didn't think about my husband or children at all. I loved them very much, but at that moment they were in second place compared to my pleasures. I was wrong and I knew it, but I didn't care. The downside was that my relationship with Ray didn't have an end goal. Where were we going and how long were we going to do what we were doing? We didn't think any further than the next day. Then it all came to an end. Ray and I met, and instead of going to his house, we went to Lake Venona, where we often went to park when we were kids. We stopped at the back of the lake. It was quiet and secluded. In the blink of an eye, we both undressed and found ourselves in the back seat of the Hummer. We were doing it like a couple of teenagers when my cell phone rang. I waited for it to ring a few times and then picked up the phone. "Hello, Jean, this is John." "Yes, John, I recognize your voice. Where are you now?" I was silent for a second, not knowing what to say. I was a lousy liar. "I'm in the supermarket parking lot, John." "Why did you ask?" "Oh, well, that's good to know, Jan, because in 10 seconds Ray Cotton's Hummer is going to explode into a big fireball. It's a good thing you're not there." "John, what did you say?" "John? 10, 9, 8, 7. I dropped my phone. "Get out. Get out of the car immediately. Quickly." Ray was amazed. "What are you talking about? What's happening?" I opened the door and jumped out, completely naked. Ray followed me, and we both ran away from the Hummer. A few seconds later, there was a loud bang, and orange smoke poured out from under the yellow monster truck. We were standing about 15 meters from the smoking Hummer when John pulled up in his pickup truck. He opened the passenger door and told me to get in. He looked at Ray through the window and said, "Next time I'll see you at your funeral." None of us said a word on the long drive home. When we arrived at the house, I had to walk from the driveway to the front door naked. I stood in the middle of the living room, afraid to move or say anything. John finally paid attention to me. "Go take a shower and put on something before the kids come back from school." It was a busy evening. John didn't tell me anything about it. I went to bed scared to death, and John was sleeping on the couch. The next morning, when I went out to get the newspaper, I found my purse and clothes in a paper bag by the front door. I put them out of sight when John came down to breakfast. Before leaving for work, he took a spring block and a king-size mattress to his truck. When he returned home from work, he had 2 single beds with him and several changes of bed linen for them. He made the beds, and I made new sheets. It lasted almost a week. One evening, when the children were not at home, I plucked up the courage and spoke to him. "John, what do you want from me? What do you want me to do?" He didn't say anything, but he looked up from reading for a second. I waited. I didn't apologize. I wasn't making excuses. I didn't whine or whine. I was just waiting for him to answer. "My first impulse was to just kill you both. I was furious at what you did to my family and to me. I was planning to just put 4 sticks of dynamite under his truck, but then I thought about what it could do to the kids. They would have lost not only their mother, but also their father. My revenge wasn't worth it. I put a Marine Corps flare in there instead of dynamite. I was waiting for you to put an end to it, but you never did. I couldn't take it anymore. I'm still angry, and I struggle with it every day. I do not know what I am capable of when I am in this state." I sat quietly, listening to every word. I didn't say anything and tried not to show any emotion. John continued, "You're going to stay here in the house and act like a mother and wife until both kids go off to college. You will perform all the duties of a wife and mother. This includes cooking, cleaning, laundry, shopping, and attending all social events. We should always be a normal family. None of us will say anything to our family or friends about what happened. I will pay you an allowance of $200 per month for your expenses and, of course, all the money you need to run a household. The day Sarah leaves for college will be the day of our divorce. I'll give you half the value of the house and half of our savings. I won't pay you alimony." It was like a prison sentence. I didn't know what to say. I sat stunned. Why didn't he just throw me out and set me free? Why is he putting me through this torture? John continued, "I do it mostly for children. I want them to have a normal childhood, and I won't let your cheating ruin their lives. I insist on it, Jean. There is nothing to negotiate here. I know this is going to sound very harsh, and it's probably going to be hard for you to accept, but please listen carefully to the last two conditions. They are very important. I was a little worried, but I decided I could handle it. If you leave before your commitment expires, I will hunt you down and kill you. If you have any contact with Ray Cotton at all, I will hunt you down and kill you both. I was stunned. I couldn't find the words. I sat there and shivered. I had no idea how much I had offended this man by making him hate me so much. I finally felt some remorse for my actions. I was cocky and arrogant in my novel, and now I was scared and worried. He figured out how to get to me, and it worked. I stood up and looked at him. I agree. That night I cried myself to sleep. The next morning, I started fulfilling my obligations and did so for 6 years without any complaints. I looked out the window again. John was still watching TV. Walking to my car, I didn't know if I was relieved or just desperate. I drove slowly across town to my rented cottage. It was small, but cozy. Most importantly, I could afford it. I ruined my life and paid for my mistake. John was a good man and deserved better than I gave him. I was ashamed of what I had done to him. However, it's time to start all over again. As I turned onto the street leading to my new home, I noticed a car parked in the driveway. It was a big, ugly yellow Hummer. I first met Jean at a diner where I had lunch every day. She was bright and cheerful. I was looking forward to meeting her. Jean was a pretty girl and was popular. She was the type of girl I usually wouldn't even think about dating. I was a big, though not fat, nondescript heavy equipment operator, and she was Miss Personality. I never thought I'd have a chance to date a girl like her, let alone marry her. It hurt me to have the courage to ask her out. Rejection would crush me, even though I'm used to it. In the end, I asked her out on a date, and she agreed. For several years, Jean dated a guy named Ray Cotton. It seemed that she and Ray were very close, but at some point he lost interest in her and just disappeared. She was heartbroken for a long time, and I kind of tried to help her come to her senses. I didn't know if it was good or bad. I didn't care because I was just happy with how things turned out. The dates we went on were very boring. I had no experience with such things, and I was very careful not to make mistakes that could ruin our relationship. Of course, I had never made love to a girl or even engaged in serious petting, so I was damn clumsy in that regard. In the end, with a lot of help from Jean, we finally made love. I learned everything I knew about it from Jean. I think I was a good student. I know I was full of enthusiasm. I tried my best to meet any requirements she might have in this area. My only goal in life was to make her happy. It took me a long time to get up the courage to talk to her about marriage. Jean, would you consider moving in with me? John Simmons, are you asking me to move in with you or marry you? Anything you like will suit me. Do you have any preferences, John? In general, yes. I would like to have children, and I think it would be better if we got married, but I don't want to rush you. This is an important step, John. Can I take a few days to think about it? Of course. I think you should take your time. This is an important decision. It wasn't a good sign for me. I felt awkward because she wasn't confident enough to answer yes or no right away. I had no choice but to give her the time she wanted. Why should she think about it? I was unhappy about it, but I had no choice but to hope for the best. 2 days later, Jean accepted my marriage proposal. We were married for 14 years, and we had a son, Terry, and a daughter, Sarah. My work was progressing well. We had a cozy home and a lifestyle. I thought everything was perfect. All the worries I had at the beginning of our marriage have disappeared. I no longer felt like someone on the sidelines. Although we didn't have a romantic life, as shown in movies or cheap novels, I still thought everything was fine. It was then that Jean began to behave a little differently. I couldn't say anything definite, but something was wrong. There was no neglect at home, but I knew that everything was not as it should be. I called home a few times in the afternoon just to chat. The children were at school. Most of the time when I called, Jean didn't answer the phone. She went shopping once a week, and now it seemed like she went shopping every day. She didn't really like shopping, whether it was food or clothes. After about a week of this shit, I decided to do something about it. I took a week off from work. I'd leave in the morning and park further down the street so I couldn't be seen. Jean got into her car, and drove to the supermarket. I watched from the parking lot, and it took several hours before she got out and drove home. I spent 3 days on this. On the fourth day, I followed her to the mall. She entered the main hall and left through the back door. I tried to follow her, but it was too late. The next day, when she parked at the entrance, I drove behind the mall and waited in a secluded place. A few minutes later, Jean got out and headed for the big yellow Hummer. She got into the passenger seat, and they drove away. I was in no position to keep an eye on them and immediately lost sight of them. My suspicions were confirmed. The worst thing I could have imagined happened. I was crushed. I have a short temper, and I had to do my best not to lose it. I had to stay calm about all this. It was going to be difficult. The kids and I were at home for the weekend, so I was sure she wasn't dating him. I've arranged to take the day off next week. I don't know if I just wasted 5 days, or if it wasn't a wasted 5 days. I kept myself in check over the weekend. On Monday morning, I parked behind the supermarket in a place where I could be seen, but not so that others could see me. I borrowed a Range Rover pickup truck from a friend at work. A Hummer pulled up, and with the help of my trusty binoculars, I memorized the license plate number. I remembered which exit they used from the mall parking lot, so I settled down nearby. I did better this time. When they left the mall, I followed them, and 10 minutes later they drove into an apartment complex. They entered one of the buildings together. At that moment, I had no intention of going to his apartment, but I had to process a lot of new information and make some plans. Of course, we all have friends in some position who can give us a license plate. The yellow Hummer belonged to Ray Cotton. What a surprise. After 14 years of marriage, that son of a bitch is back in my life. My rage was growing. I spent the next day at home trying to figure out what to do. I had 2 wonderful children who had no idea that their mother was a cheater. I didn't want them to find out. Whatever I did, it had to be done so that the children wouldn't get hurt. I could make fear and rage work for me if I controlled myself. I was big enough and could be menacing if needed. Anyway, I had to stop this affair and make it seem to the children that nothing had happened. A divorce from Jean at this stage would not have given me what I wanted. Killing Jean or Ray would have done nothing. I had to force Jean to stay and continue to be a wife and mother until the kids left for college. I decided to do it with fear and intimidation. It wasn't in my nature, but I had to try to make it look plausible. First, I had to get their attention. My original plan was to put 4 sticks of dynamite under his Hummer and blow it up when they weren't there, of course. However, federal laws prohibit such things, and my stay in prison would not improve the situation. I decided that using a smoke bomb could achieve the same result without sending me to prison. There were a large number of emergency smoke bombs in the local marine equipment store. All I had to do was figure out how to light one of them remotely. After spending several nights in the basement, I finally figured it out using some of the components of the remote-controlled toy car that Terry had already grown out of. I was able to test this device easily, and it worked at a distance of more than 70 meters. I was proud of myself. The week has come to an end. The next week was approaching, and I had to take some more time off from work. The weekend went pretty well because now I felt like I was in control of the situation. Everything should have been cleared up by this time next week. Early Sunday morning, I went to Ray Cotton's apartment complex and discreetly set up my electric flare under his yellow Hummer. All I needed right now was the right moment to put it into action. The next day I was waiting for them at the supermarket exit. Instead of going to his house, they headed north. It was easy to follow them unnoticed. They seemed so busy with each other that they wouldn't have noticed even if I was in the fire truck. They drove to Lake Venona, drove around it from the back, and parked in a remote location. Because of the dense bushes, it was not difficult for me to remain unnoticed. My old binoculars came in handy again when I watched them undress and start caressing each other. I picked up my cell phone and called Jean. "Hello. Jean, this is John." "Yes, John. I recognize your voice. Where are you now?" She was silent for a second, not knowing what to say. She was a lousy liar. "I'm in the supermarket parking lot, John." "Why did you ask?" "Oh, well, that's good to know, Jan, because in 10 seconds Ray Cotton's Hummer is going to explode into a big fireball. It's a good thing you're not there." "John, what did you say?" 10, 9, 8, 7. I heard her hang up the phone. Get out. Get out of the car right now. Quickly." Ray was amazed. "What are you talking about? What's happening?" She opened the door and jumped out, completely naked. Ray followed her, and they both ran away from the Hummer. I pressed the button on the remote control. There was a loud bang, and orange smoke poured out from under the yellow monster truck. They were standing about 15 meters away from the smoking Hummer when I pulled up in a pickup truck. I opened the passenger door and told Jean to get in. I looked at Ray through the window and said, "Next time I'll see you at your funeral." None of us said a word on the long drive home. When we arrived at the house, I forced her to walk from the driveway to the front door without clothes. She stood in the middle of the living room, afraid to move or say anything. Finally, I noticed her. "Go take a shower and put on something before the kids come back from school." It was a busy evening. We didn't talk about anything. Jean went to bed, scared to death, and I fell asleep on the couch. Before leaving for work, I took the spring mattress to my truck. When I got home from work, I had 2 single beds and several changes of bed linen for them. I put the beds together, and Jean quietly made new sheets. This went on for almost a week. One evening, when the children were not at home, Jean plucked up the courage and spoke to me. "John, what do you want from me? What do you want me to do?" I didn't say anything, but I looked up from reading for a second. She didn't apologize. She didn't make excuses. She didn't whine or whimper. I could tell she was waiting for my answer. "My first impulse was just to kill you both. I was furious at what you did to my family and to me. I was planning on just putting 4 sticks of dynamite under his truck, but then I thought about what it could do to the kids. They would have lost not only their mother, but also their father. My revenge wasn't worth it. I put a Marine Corps flare in there instead of dynamite. I was waiting for you to put an end to it, but you never did. I couldn't take it anymore. I'm still angry, and I struggle with it every day. I do not know what I am capable of when I am in this state." She sat quietly, listening to every word. She didn't say anything and tried not to show any emotion. I continued, "You're going to stay here in the house and act like a mother and wife until both kids go off to college. You will perform all the duties of a wife and mother. This includes cooking, cleaning, laundry, shopping, and attending all social events. It should always seem like we're a normal family. None of us will say anything to our family or friends about what happened. I will pay you an allowance of $200 per month for your expenses and, of course, all the money you need to run a household. The day Sarah leaves for college will be the day of our divorce. I'll give you half the value of the house and half of our savings. I won't pay you alimony." It was like a prison sentence. I don't think she knew what to say. She sat stunned. I assumed she was wondering why I didn't just throw her out and set her free, or why I was torturing her like that. I continued, "I do it mostly for children. I want them to have a normal childhood, and I won't let your cheating ruin their lives." "I insist on it, Jean. There is nothing to negotiate here. I know this is going to sound very harsh, and it's probably going to be hard for you to accept, but please listen carefully to the last 2 conditions. They are very important." I could tell she was a little worried, but decided she could handle it. "If you leave before your commitment expires, I will hunt you down and kill you. If you have any contact with Ray Cotton, I will hunt you down and kill both of you." It was fear and intimidation, which, as I understood it, should have forced her to agree to this. I had no intention of killing anyone, but I couldn't let her know about it. Jean fulfilled her part of the contract. For 6 years, she played the role of an obedient wife and a loving mother. I have never had any complaints about her actions. I was hoping that eventually she would give some kind of explanation or apologize. I didn't get anything. There was no remorse on her part. She never said she loved me again, and she showed no signs of wanting to resume any kind of loving relationship. I was looking for something. I was hoping for something. Nothing came. Even though she performed all her duties, her attitude never changed, and there were never any more displays of affection. It seemed to me that this upset me a little. About 3 months before the end of our commitment period, I was working in Lancaster when I came across an article in the local newspaper. A man named Ray Cotton was shot dead at a local motel while making love to another man's wife. I felt some satisfaction after reading about it. On a sudden impulse, I found the time and went to the local police station. Ray's Hummer was towed to a police impound lot where his next of kin could pick him up. They gave me the name and phone number of Ray's brother, who lived in York. I called him and was able to negotiate the purchase of a Hummer at a below-market price. He didn't want this, and having to deal with it was a real pain in the ass for him. Jean was saving money from her account, which I opened for her. What she didn't know was that I was also saving money that was left over from the household expenses fund every month. I figured out how much money it would take to run a household, and if there was anything left, I put it off. I took money from this fund to buy a Hummer. As we approached Jean's last days in our house, she found a small cottage that could be rented. She had moved some of her belongings to the cottage and was going to take what was left in the car with her when she moved in. The night before her last day, I parked a big, ugly yellow Hummer in the driveway of her rented cottage. In the driver's seat, I placed the documents of the new car in her name and a copy of the newspaper article about Ray Cotton's death. I was sure she would be happy to see the Hummer when she arrived at her new home. It was a small thing, but I felt she deserved it. End.